Good morning. My name is David Tracy. Welcome to my presentation for class for TH526, in which I'll be sharing information and insights into a religion and a faith other than my own. The faith I have chosen to research and present is the Bahai faith. The reason for choosing it is simply because I wanted to explore a faith about which I knew virtually nothing. I wanted to expand my horizons a little bit and gain understanding. I believe I'd heard of the Baha'i faith in passing, maybe as part of a celebrity interview. They mentioned they were following the Baha'i faith and just little tidbits of information about it. But before starting this project, that's about all I knew. The little I did know consisted of an understanding that it's a faith based largely on a desire for humanity to get along and for people to treat each other well. And that's a sentiment to which we can all agree. And I was curious to know more, such as where it originated, what they believe, and what they were basing their faith upon. So, as far as the history of the Baha'i faith, regarding the origin, it's a bit of a latecomer as far as the stage of world religions. It was founded in 1844 in the Persian Empire, which we know today as the country of Iran. It began with two men. The first was Bob, spelled B-A-B, by the way. Bob began teaching, and it started when he started teaching. What he was teaching was perceived at the time to simply be another sect of Shiite Islam, which was the predominant faith in the area, in the region. But it quickly became apparent that the teaching of Bob was very different than the teaching of Shia Muslims. Bob announced he was the bearer of a message from God. The message he had been given was how to transform humanity. Now, he was the herald, or the one who came before, the one who would actually expand upon this message. But the message would consist of how to bring humanity to a place of greater spiritual maturity. He called himself a harbinger of a second messenger who would bring with him the complete message of peace and harmony. If you're getting John the Baptist vibes, I believe that is what they were going for. Bob was executed by the Persian authorities a few years after starting. He had started teaching in 1844, started being a harbinger and a forerunner of the one who was to come, and he died in 1850, executed by the Shiite Muslims. He was followed by Baha'u'llah, whose name means glory of God. He proclaimed himself to be the divine messenger Bob had spoken of. Baha'u'llah was sent, he said, to deliver a new revelation for all of humanity. And he wrote extensively about the revelation he had been given, thousands of pages. And during his life, he also experienced persecution from the Persian authorities. He was imprisoned, he was beaten, that, he did not have a good and easy time of it. There's almost a sense, and I didn't see it specifically written anywhere, that the Baha'i faith was founded in opposition to Islamic rule in Persia at the time. We can't be certain, but as we get into the message of Baha'i, we'll get into that shortly. It almost feels polemical against the tenets and the teaching of Islam. So Baha'u'llah is teaching this message, and there was a line of succession after him. Even under persecution, when Baha'u'llah died in 1892, and before he died, he appointed his son, Abdul Baha, to interpret his writings and continue teaching the revelation that he had brought during his lifetime. So, not to add to the revelation, that was Baha'u'llah, he was the messenger, and Abdul Baha, his son, was intended to interpret and teach on those revelation, or on the revelation that had been given. When Abdul Baha passed away, his son, Shoghi Effendi is his name, he became the leader of the Baha faith. So we have a line of succession from from the messenger to his son to his grandson, that they continued the teaching and the message that had been given to Baha'u'llah. The grandson, Shoghi Effendi, died in 1957. A few years after his death in 1963, a center was founded to continue the teachings that had been handed down through those two generations. The center was called the Universal House of Justice, and it's been around since that time. The members of Baha'i currently number somewhere worldwide of around 7 or 8 million people. And this is now the central authority of the Baha'i faith is the Universal House of Justice. So the succession went from Baha'u'llah to his son to his grandson and has now been handed over to the center or the Universal House of Justice. So to summarize, Bob was the herald. The person for whom the religion was named was Baha'u'llah. And this revelation that had been given to him is now being taught worldwide, and there are millions of adherents to the faith. So, what was the message? Well, what do people of the Baha'i faith believe? The overarching message is the idea that God is a real entity to begin with. He's beyond our comprehension, but we can see him in nature and we can see him in other people, in all the people around us. According to the Baha'i faith, throughout the history of mankind, God has sent divine messengers, otherwise known as manifestations of God. The role of these messengers has been to guide humanity to new levels of spirituality, moving us toward new levels of advancement and development as a species. The divine manifestations of God have included Abraham, Moses, Krishna, Zoroaster, Buddha, Jesus, Mohammed, and of course, Bob and Baha'u'llah. All major religions, according to the Baha'i faith, all major religions are seen as divine in origin, upholding the universal laws of God while bringing in new sets of laws or unveiling new revelation and guidance to promote spiritual development and maturity for mankind. The Baha'i faith holds to the view that all of the major religions operate in harmony with one another, with differences only being found in the secondary and non-essential doctrines of each faith. Simply put, they see each religion of the world as contributing the same basic message to humanity in order to move it forward toward collective maturity. This maturity will be marked by humanity learning to understand the oneness of God and all religions as part of the progressive revelation of religious truth. There's a sense in which not even a sense, it's the direct teaching that there is an innate nobility of human beings, the spiritual oneness of humanity as a species, that there's a harmony between religion and science, an emphasis on the need for justice for all people, and the need for universal education, which, according to the Baha'i faith, will help to guide people to the necessary realizations to bring us into a place of spiritual maturity. This advancement, as we learn to grasp all of these things, will make a global civilization finally possible, in which peace and justice and harmony with nature and with each other is finally achievable. And that's the societal aspect. That's where humanity is going and where it's headed, according to the Baha'i faith, with each religion contributing to this path, to this journey that God has for us. So that's the societal aspect. For the individual, followers of the Baha'i faith, adherents to that belief, are called to seek that which will sanctify the hearts and souls of others. Personal responsibility is held in high regard. Compassion is promoted as a high ideal. Charity is espoused as an absolute necessity. One of the quotes from Baha'u'llah states, quote, He who is your Lord, the all merciful, cherisheth in his heart the desire of beholding the entire human race as one soul and one body. After reading some of the writings of the Baha'i founder, including that quote, I found myself wondering why the writing of a man born in 19th century Persia sounded an awful lot like the King James Bible. I don't know, maybe to sound more official. I could be missing something. But as I read through the history and the theology of Baha'i, I guess I didn't understand why someone might be interested in becoming a follower. I was wondering, I was asking myself this question, why would I, as I'm reading through his writing, but then I look around at the state of the world and everything the world teaches and promotes as far as decadence, selfishness, shallow pursuits, things that don't satisfy, that don't fulfill. And when I see the lack of love and compassion that the world presents so often, I begin to understand why an individual would be drawn to the Baha'i faith. Baha'i tells people you're basically good. Noble is the word they use. And that it's our choices that bring us to a higher sense of spirituality. There is no downside. It's neutral without growth. If you don't follow, it's just it's neutral or it's up. I can stay where I am, or I can put in a bit of work, some personal improvement, and I can grow. And I get to have a sense of spirituality as part of that growth. And that's appealing. I understand why somebody would seek that. For the person who is seeking a framework in which to live out their life that calls for personal responsibility, for refinement of their character, for those who wish to have a sense of spirituality in their lives, who are seeking a meaning beyond themselves, but they don't want to be bogged down by a sense of submission that so many other religions call for. I get it. I understand. I'd mentioned earlier that I suspected Baha'i might have originated as a polemic against the Persian authorities and even against the other faiths of the world that were dominant at the time. At the time, there was a great conflict among empires, sometimes seen as religious conflicts, and they were. No matter where you went, you had some religious authorities over you. If you lived in Persia, you lived under Islamic rule, and the word Islam itself means submission. It's interesting to me that a faith would come out of a time and a place that it would originate that in that time and place that promotes the idea of an impersonal God to whom followers of faith would have very little personal responsibility other than their own self-improvement. And the impersonal nature of God, according to Baha'i, can be found in the prayers that are recited. They're all very positive. I can see that standing in stark contrast to the Shiite Muslim rule of the time, and it would be very appealing for people. In their prayers, there's brief and passing mention of evil, within the person praying, that they don't really discuss sin like we think of it in a Christian setting. But the vast majority of praise toward God sounds like a mix of all the major religions combined, which makes sense because according to the Baha'i faith, each of those major religions is part of Baha'i. As far as reaching those of the Baha'i faith, I believe I would have to come alongside them and acknowledge the fact that they're seeking it for noble reasons. I don't want to discount that. In fact, I want to come alongside that and bring them to a better place of logic and reason, because that's what I think the Baha'i faith lacks. The idea that all faiths of the world is demonstrably false, that they're all the same, or that they teach the same message, or that their fundamental ideas of what is good are the same. It's simply not true. The idea that Christianity, that the way of salvation through Christianity, that the God of Christianity is the same as the God of Islam is simply not true. That I admire their desire for what they're seeking, that I admire the call to personal growth and personal responsibility and for charity and for all those things, but to help them to realize that all of those things are part of Christianity. The person I imagine being pulled into the Baha'i faith or being drawn to it is a person who maybe has been hurt by church, who doesn't understand the Bible. Perhaps they've been taught it improperly. They see religion as a harsh overlord rather than the God of the Bible, who calls for charity, who calls for all the things that they seek, all the things they aspire to, or all the things that He has for us. So I think, in short, I think the best approach is to come alongside them, applaud them for their desire, and show them that their desire has a true foundation in the Bible. Thank you.